It is Friday, August 29th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Metal Gear Lost Soul Aside episode of LTPS. We've got a lot going on in the PlayStation landscape from this past week, so let's begin, as always, with our PS Plus reminder. This is your final warning to claim the August PS Plus Essential games before they go away, so do that and get that done. This coming Tuesday on September 2nd, it's going to change over to Psychonauts 2, PlayStation 4, Stardew Valley PS4, and Viewfinder for PS4 and PS5 as well. Now, I don't know about all of you, but to me, this is a very strong lineup for PS Plus Essential. Psychonauts 2 is an excellent 3D platformer, a more recent 3D platformer as well that harkens back to the PS2 Xbox days because of Psychonauts 1, obviously. But that game, too, is in a weird spot, right? Because that was a game that Microsoft at the time acquired Double Fine, and I don't even think it was a contractual agreement, but they were still fulfilling the obligation of shipping that game on PlayStation 4, and that was still when they were committed to doing that, but not much else, and now they've had a U-turn of willingly shipping PlayStation games, but I think Double Fine is, already past that game to the point where they're not going to do a native PS5 release, so that's why it's headlining PS Plus, but it's actually a PS4 game. And then Stardew Valley speaks for itself. That game is like the pinnacle, cozy game, crafting experience. You can spend hundreds of thousands of hours on that game, so it's very dangerous to start that game. And then Viewfinder is also a bit shorter, but a very unique, fun experience where it's puzzle solving mixed in with this like camera element where you take pictures and the photos can lead you into new and different environments. And it was a very quirky experience where I played that game for 30 Platinums Part 3, so it's very fun as well. And this month in particular is worth noting because the two headline games in theory here are PS4 titles, and we have to remind ourselves that by January 2026, which is not too far away at this point, that's where Sony will be not prioritizing PS4 games. I think by proxy of how many games are, cross-gen nowadays, you're still going to see some PS4 games on offer for PS Plus Essential, but it's worth noting they're not going to go out of their way to make sure that a game has a PS4 version on Plus Essential. So in this case, this might be the last time we see a lineup for Essential where it's primarily PS4 titles at the end of the day. Anyway, moving on to our first news story, Sony is finally offering a way to request refunds from the PlayStation Store without having to contact PlayStation support by a chat agent or calling in, something like that. So I do want to be clear, though, this is not a policy change, so you still have to be within their criteria of a 14-day window. Do not play the game, you can't download the game, you can't stream it, you can't do anything, basically, to qualify for a refund. But if you're in that window, then there's now a new process on desktop or mobile. So on desktop, for example, you can log into your PSN account, click on your avatar, then account settings, then transaction history, find an eligible purchase, and there should be an option right there where you can request a refund. And so now it's a much more automated process, same on mobile. You look at transaction history, request refund. So not too bad. Obviously, it was something where if you were in that criteria, the chat support would usually grant it for you. It's usually very specific cases, obviously, because most people, when they buy something, they download it immediately, and that would disqualify you from the refund. Unless it's a very extreme case, like a Mind's Eye or Cyberpunk, where at that point, mass refund requests are coming in, and then Sony makes a exemption to the policy, right? In this case, though, it's still the same policy. And I don't know if they'll ever change that. I would love it for it to be just a little bit more lenient. I'm not sure if they would ever do, a 2-hour open window like Steam does, because that is incredibly generous. Some games can be finished in under 2 hours. So there is like a very clear issue there. But if it's something as simple as 5-10 minutes, which would, I think, open up the window for a lot more people on accidental purchases, then, that would definitely be a lot easier. So in this case for now, though, there is an automated process. You can start doing that and use it for those examples where you might have accidentally bought something you didn't mean to. Next up, let's go over some PlayStation Studio news, beginning with Gran Turismo 7's 1.62 update for PS4 and PS5. This game does get monthly updates, so new world circuit events and cafe menus, new cars. But this update is a little bit noteworthy in that for the new cars, there's not only the new fully EV25 Corvette CX concept and the Corvette CXR concept, the Renault Aventime 3.0 V6 24V, but there's also the 2026 Afeela 1, the Sony car we've been seeing at CES for the past 2-3 years now, the new subsidiary and collaboration formed between Sony and Honda for the Sony Honda Mobility Initiative and this production vehicle that they do intend on actually launching next year. And it's a 6-figure, fully EV, crazy-looking vehicle with a huge, massive display in the front, a lot of driver assistance tech, going to be very fast off the line, of course. We've seen Sony demo the car with a DualSense controller where they can control it, and there's Horizon running in the background on the display and things like that, or streaming to it rather. So the car is very quirky, and for many, this is probably the only way you'll be able to like drive the damn thing. So it's just cool that it's now in Gran Turismo 7, so you can actually buy the car and drive it and check it out in GT7, which for many is a very authentic way to experience many vehicles with how they drive and feel. So that's in GT7 right now. Moving on to Ghost of Yotei, where Sucker Punch has confirmed that the game has gone gold ahead of its October 2nd release, which is fantastic news. So shout out to Sucker Punch and the hardworking team over there for getting a Gold Master ready in time. I would hope with the amount of time we have left, that is what is being sent to print. So it's a very tight window, but let's just have our fingers crossed there, but still great news, and that is on top of new gameplay details for the Wolf and new gameplay of firearm combat in the game. So for the Wolf, confirmed by PlayStation social media, we found out that the Wolf is just kind of free roaming in the game, so it may join you, it may not. It really depends on your progress with discovering wolf dens and rescuing the caged wolves, and that's going to earn you skill points for the Wolf skill tree, and that will then increase your chance of having the Wolf join you in combat. So that's pretty neat. I mean, it makes sense. It's a feral animal, but it might be very fun later in the game, late game, where you're maybe in a bit of a bind and hoping the Wolf comes in to basically save you. So that'll be pretty fun there. And then for the firearm gameplay, pretty self-explanatory in that I think based on the time period, we all knew this was not going to be a primary weapon. It's going to be very supplementary to the combat in that as you're sort of working through a settlement, slicing and dicing, you might be able to, work in a long reload animation and then pick off a guy from a distance, maybe close up, and that leads into, again, more slicing as it sort of either kills the guy immediately or maybe just gives you a chance or an open window to, again, go for the finishing blow with the swords. So otherwise, I think that the firearm will definitely complement the gameplay and a way that fits naturally, but it all looks very good, and as expected, the game will be playable at TGS next to Marvel ToeCon as well, so not too surprising there, but the game is still looking quite good. Like I said before, they could have stopped showing things after that 15-something minute state of play. I'm good to go here, but what sucks is I will not be able to play the game right away, given what I may or may not be doing in October. Some of you might be aware of that as well, so I might not get to the game until like November or something, but either way, I'm still very excited, and it looks really good. In other Yotei news, we can also mention the PlayStation hardware that Sony showed off during that Ghost of Yotei State of Play. We now have pricing and pre-order details as well. So the pre-orders go live September 4th, and so the gold version of the console will be on PS Direct and select retailers, and the Black Edition is only on PS Direct. Both consoles will be $599 USD, and the controllers will be $84 USD as well, or $84.99 USD, I should clarify, which it's the same separation as well, so the Black Edition is only on PS Direct, and then the gold version will be at PS Direct and select retailers as well. The gold console covers are $64.99 USD, and there's only gold console covers, only the slim version as well, so there's no Gen 1 PS5 version, there's no Black Edition, so that's the cutoff there basically. They're pretty pricey, all things considered, but at least there's an option for controllers and an option for the gold console covers, not the black one, so I don't know, it's kind of like a pick and choose battle there. These are not really for me, but if they are something that you want, then the pre-orders do begin on September 4th. Let's move on to some live service news and another very candid answer about PlayStation's rocky and turbulent live service initiative, this time from Hermen Hulst, the CEO of the studio's business group of SIE. And so recently speaking with the Financial Times, he was talking about live service challenges, saying, and I quote here, "The number of live service games is not so important. What is important to me is having a diverse set of player experiences and a set of communities. We have since put in place much more rigorous and more frequent testing in very many different ways. The advantage of every failure is that people now understand how necessary that oversight is. I don't want teams to always play it safe, but I would like for us, when we fail, to fail early and cheaply." Now, it's explained further in the article that right now the company is getting into more group testing and encouraging collaboration across studios. And Hermen also explained that they want to do more with the IP creation beyond games, saying, and I quote here, "We take a very intentional approach to IP creation, understanding how a new concept can turn into an iconic franchise for PlayStation that can then again become a franchise for people beyond gaming." So a lot there, we've already sort of like seen just telegraphed by their own decisions, right? Canceling so many live service games. I mean, when he's saying like, oh, now it's not really about how many we make. Well, clearly because you cancel a bunch of games and you're not even close to this initial goal you had a few years ago of launching, 12 live service games by fiscal year 25, 26, whatever it was, right? We're not even close to that because they've now understood that what it takes to build a successful live service game is much harder than they thought. Not to say it would be easy, but they just had no experience in this area. And also, I mean, it's just, we can put it as plainly as this is the Sony method. His second quote there about, hey, we want to still experiment, but if we're going to do it, if we're going to fail, let's do it cheaply. That is the Sony method. That's the point I always make as far as like, okay, we can look at all the cancellations and think, man, this has been an absolute nightmare. It's, it looks bad on PlayStation, but I think you cancel games before you ship them and have another 6 or 7 Concords, right? Like that is the whole point of what the Cerny method was in 2004, Mark Cerny's methodology for producing and shipping a game, and that, even if you are looking at a very big substantial loss, you cancel it there before it gets even more. You don't want to fall into the sunken cost fallacy, basically, and PlayStation is just recalculating how to navigate the live service environment. I still find it needs to be something where if you're going to build live service games, okay, but put a super early alpha playable out there, like the earliest thing that you can release to the public, put it out there so they can decide right then and there immediately of if this thing has any sort of viable path for the studio. Can it be monetized? Is there a gameplay loop that makes sense? They need to start doing that, which historically PlayStation has never done that. They do Concords, and that they make a very polished experience and ship it, and that might work for single-player games, not so much for live service. As far as the IP creation, that also gets into modern PlayStation, late life cycle PS4, most of the PS5 cycle, and that, for a lot of in-house games or even these, experiences that they contract out, they're going for very big, high caliber AAA projects. They don't really want to make small bets anymore, like the Japan Studio stuff, which, mind you, they still do a Lego Horizon, they still do an Astrobot or a Returnal, which, arguably is still in the AA something space, or it doesn't have mass market appeal, but you get my point, right? And that they are looking to monetize these games beyond video games and have an HBO series, an Amazon Prime series, merchandising. You can look at Concord and see man, these people really thought this was going to be something when it was not simply Concord. They had merchandise ready to go day one. They had the collaboration with that one Amazon series that I can't remember the name of right now. They wanted to do all these other tie-ins. There was there was a comic or something, right? Like they thought that thing was going to be culturally relevant, and obviously it wasn't. So they've learned, okay, we need to take a step back, do more rigorous testing, and let's just hope that is now a brighter future for PlayStation if they will continue to do live service alongside, yes, still single-player games. Now, in other very relevant news, we also have a story about teamLFG, which is PlayStation Studios' new team that was spun off from Bungie. This is the Gummy Bears project that is still in a very early state, but maybe it's going to be playable at some point fairly soon, we would hope, because based on this job posting spotted by the Game Post, they are looking for a staff community developer with the intention of building a pre-alpha community. So it says, and I quote here, "You will work closely with the game directors and leads to set the direction for our community management strategy. In this role, you will build a pre-alpha community from the ground up via Discord and other social channels to grow a new multiplayer action game." So it doesn't say a whole lot outside of just that. I mean, they're looking to sort of really staff up for that very specific role of what should be early playtesting, building a community of players that will be able to blend and mold that game into something that may or may not be commercially viable. That is what they need to start doing, and I think with teamLFG, perhaps we will actually see that based on that job posting and them shipping something that is remotely playable for the community. Now, another somewhat relevant news story here is that on the flip side of all the live service and AAA stuff in-house, Sony does still do smaller experiences with things like the Hero Project programs, and so the MENA Hero Project, the Middle East North Africa project, was kicked off not too long ago, I want to say 6-7 months or something like that, and it did not take long for us to get the first candidates out of that program. So we have 4 new games out of the MENA Hero program, and so first up is Red Bandits for PS5 and PC from Team Agenda in Saudi Arabia. This is a fast-paced robbery action game. And then next is NC Solution for PS5 and PC from Dark Emerald in the UAE. This is a 2.5 narrative platformer. Next is The Perfect Run for PS5 and PC from Lantern Studios in Tunisia. This is an action-adventure RPG. And then next is A Cat's Manor PS5 and PC from Happiest Dark Corner. This is an atmospheric adventure that blends puzzles, combat crafting, and rhythm-based music challenges. So all very different kind of experiences, games that we might not have seen on PS5 otherwise, because that is the other caveat here, whether the team is from a developing country or not. They can always self-publish on PC. That's what most studios do. Most smaller studios, indie teams, one-man teams, they can all self-publish on PC all day, every day, but it's the financial backing, resources from Sony in this case, to be able to not only publish on console, but perhaps get more exposure on console as well. So oftentimes to be able to be on the PlayStation Store, be on the PlayStation blog, be a part of this on LTPS where we're talking about these games, it gives them more exposure, and they might be able to make more money and get off the ground as a studio to be successful in the games business. So I'd be very curious to see what we get from these 4 games here and see more of them, since there's not really a whole lot to say right now outside of a quick synopsis. But loving the hero programs, I think we see so many cool creative things out of these programs, and Sony should continue doing more of them, more phases. Let's keep it rolling. Now, as for the China Hero Project game Lost Soul Aside, which came out today, this one might have some issues as of right now because, one, there were no reviews because no review code was sent out, and the studio did confirm that there is a pretty vital day one patch that should be downloaded, so that's for optimizations and stability, audio refinements, and final polishing. So the game, it sounds like initially, based on the few people that got early copies, that it is in rough shape, and obviously that's contingent on if they have the day one patch or not, so it's still not entirely clear how vital that day one patch is, but it does seem like it probably is necessary since review code was not sent out as well. That can usually telegraph exactly maybe what's going on here, so that is a disappointment. But, again, the game always sounded like it is compelling. Just to what degree? It sounds like it might have some jank, maybe it might have some issues here and there. It might not certainly be a 9 out of 10, but still curious to see how it does pan out. So as more people spend more time with the game, we will get a better idea of how it's shaping up. Okay, let's get into a big rumor here for Sony's next-gen plans, that being PlayStation 6 and the PlayStation 6 Handheld, codenamed Canis, which in this case, we've got another video here from Tom over on their channel, Moore's Law is Dead, where he claims to have seen more up-to-date documentation from AMD that details the specifications for the handheld, and he even shows off a render of the handheld's APU, which is a 135mm TSMC 3nm node. But as for the specs itself, we are hearing allegedly it is 4 Zen 6C cores for gaming and 2 Zen 6 low-power cores for the UI and non-gaming tasks. Also 16 RDNA 5 CUs with a 192-bit LPDDR5X memory. Now, Tom does also try and estimate pricing based on publicly available info, websites that calculate silicon cost, and Tom's own experience as an engineering account manager. But he does make it clear these numbers are not perfect. Anyway, the point to get across here, the main one is that the 3nm yield for Canis is allegedly very good, to the point where the APU cost is considerably lower for the handheld, which might illustrate why Tom feels that Sony is in a position of offering Canis at a very aggressive, on the low end, $349 USD, but likely closer to a range of $400 to $500. And that puts Orion, the PS6 codename, in the $549 to $700 ballpark. And there is also a PS6S he's labeled here, which he has mentioned before, which is apparently a console variant of Canis, which is meant to be a cheaper alternative to next gen, so indeed a Series S situation, but it's basically the handheld in a console form factor. So it's not necessarily another third unit here. technically it is, but it's the performance profile of the handheld with no screen, so it's a plug-and-play box like a console, and that should be the lowest priced option. But as for more details about Canis, manufacturing is planned for mid-2027, fall 2027 launch is likely. We heard prior that that could slip into early 2028, but now it's strictly fall 2027. Memory is 24 to 36 gigabytes based on developer testimonials that's what it would need for next-gen games and headroom for AI. A lot of developer testimonials apparently said that they really want, ideally, an extra 10 gigs of memory if AI and a lot of low language models are going to be a key pillar to next-gen games and what PlayStation is wanting to do. But the handheld, we are also hearing, is going to have a proper docked mode, which is very similar to the Switch in that there is a slight performance increase when it is docked. And so factoring in FSR4, real-world performance would actually exceed PS5 games if they're properly supported on the handheld. So there's an actual performance profile made for their game. If it's simply running a PS5 game unpatched, then they'll probably run slightly worse. So broadly speaking, that's what you need to know right now. Digesting a lot of that info, what you need to take away from that is the price point. And I guess the docked portion, that's new information. We saw prior that it would have USB-C video out capabilities, but that could have been something as simple as like the PSP back in the day, which is it's a cable you plug in, and sure enough, you can get video out, but you're basically just running it in the same performance threshold. In this case, it would be a docked experience where perhaps it has an accessory that it docks into, and that would be something where you get a very minor bump to performance, but you could, in theory, use the handheld in a console manner, right, to play it on the TV, which would be definitely great, and that is something that I think Sony is eyeing up for sure as they look at Nintendo Switch and Switch 2 and the success of that platform, and also, more importantly, as to why Sony is now more heavily invested in doing a proper handheld again with the same developer environment as basically their home console, so therefore there's no major issue with having to support, say, a Vita and a PS4 at the same time, but there's still the upside of getting back into the Japanese market, which heavily leans on handhelds as well. So we could see a major return to form for PlayStation if they're offering a handheld that is really compelling, especially to users that have built a PSN digital library for many, many years now at this point. So the Japanese market has a very big upside there, and with docked, the pricing is also fascinating, right? Because I would have thought like minimum $450, $500. Conceivably, I don't think it would go any lower, even though Tom makes a pretty compelling point in that the 3nm has a really good yield, and that's how they're able to offer this thing at what might be a very compelling price by 2027. But that's also highly contingent on trade wars and where tariffs may or may not be by that point, right? So Sony could be put in a very difficult position, but I'm not surprised by PlayStation 6's potential pricing. That thing, I think we're all sort of, I would think, in agreement of they'll just phase out the Pro beforehand, and they'll try to, for the optics, not have that thing be priced at $700 or more. Ideally, I would think lower, and that would also be, unfortunately, contingent on it not having a disk drive, I would think, which would suck. I still think they will offer one or a variant or at least an add-on down the road, but that remains to be seen. That's all speculation on my part. And then the PS6S situation, I don't know if that's the right play. I mean, it might look compelling to a consumer, but generally multiple SKUs can look a little bit confusing, even if one is like a really low price and it's the same performance profile as a docked, Canis handheld. So that I don't necessarily feel too strongly about. Multiple SKUs at that point have never been something I'm a big fan of, but there's a lot of ways we could speculate. We'll leave it there for now, but it's interesting hearing a lot of this stuff, and we'll keep following it very closely to see how close Tom may or may not be correct as far as these initial specifications for PS6 and the handheld are concerned. Moving on to our next story, and in keeping with the speculative next-gen discussion, we are hearing from one well-known game producer that they don't think a next-gen set of boxes is really all that necessary right now. So speaking during Gamescom last week with Feed for Gamers, the series producer for Final Fantasy, Naoki Yoshida, thinks that there really isn't a point to new consoles just yet. This was in response to bringing Final Fantasy XIV to hypothetical new hardware, where he said, and I quote here, when I look at things from a gamer's perspective, I feel that there's no real need to make new hardware because I think right now people are happy with the Xbox Series X, the PS5, or the Switch 2. And honestly, from a gamer's perspective as well, hardware is just expensive to buy. He's not wrong. I will say PS6 is in such a weird spot, right? I see this story and then I think, well, at least I see a lot of responses being like, well, we're seeing a lot of games right now being heavily unoptimized or not hitting 60 FPS consistently anymore, or there's still a lot of graphical gains we can see in the console environment. Ray tracing is still not used nearly as much or to the degree that people were thinking it would be used during the cycle. There's path tracing we could see, which could dramatically influence the way that games look and appear. There's still the advent of AI use in games, which could, as far as like image reconstruction, really offer some performance benefits. So there's like a lot of upside there that we could easily see. On the flip side, there are often people of this mind of this generation only just getting started, which is because of long dev cycles and COVID sort of delaying games by 1-2 years essentially, right? And things are very expensive, so conceivably by the time we have a new round of hardware, that might look very expensive. The thing I'm thinking about too in the here and now is that there actually is some upside Sony could lean into for consoles and next gen, in that they are able to offer very compelling boxes at affordable prices. That was part of the rumor from Tom with Moore's Law is Dead, is that apparently a lot of the things he was seeing on the documents was a heavy focus on transitioning last gen owners and making these boxes affordable going into the next cycle, which is probably also being very mindful of the existing economy and trade war that we are now in if they're planning on shipping these things by 2027. So they would still be dealing with a lot of that stuff. But, you know, because of that, there is this, you know, it looks very attractive when PC's never been more popular, right? PC's doing incredibly well nowadays. And that's all well and good. It does bring a lot of new gamers into the space, and there's just, you know, gaming is still relatively healthy in that regard. It's just that building a PC is not exactly cheap. And, you know, I know PC gamers love to shout from the rooftops that it can still be affordable. You can still get great deals if you build it yourself. It's still very easy, but nothing will be as easy or cheaper than an established console manufacturer with economies of scale working in their favor. And there's something very compelling, I think, in today's age with PS5 and even going into PlayStation 6 of, hey, look at this 4K 120 box. Look at this device that can do, you know, some path tracing games. Look at the performance you can see on some of these games. And it is a plug and play box that is going to work. It's cross-play, so you're going to still be able to play and talk with your friends. It's got Discord integration. I mean, there's something very compelling about that in this environment where it is not as cheap or as easy as PC people would like to make you think it is. There's, you know, there's give and take there. So Sony has that console advantage, and I think they should be leaning into it. Now, that's a great segue into our next news story, which is about console sales here in the US, where for the month of July, everything dropped by a pretty decent margin except Switch 2, which was a brand new platform launch this year. So, of course, that one is scaling up its install base, but everything else is down by a decent amount. So this data comes from Circana, which tracks video game sales data here in the US, courtesy of Matt Piscatella. And so we saw the Xbox Series S and X. It saw a 69% year-over-year decline in July. Not too shocking there, given where Xbox is right now and their very steep price increase. Switch 1, unsurprisingly, saw a 52% decline year-over-year, and PlayStation 5 is down 47%. Those are all ranked by dollar sales, by the way, and that's PS5 down 47% before the price increase that happened recently in this month, right? So August will be very fascinating, August and September, to see where PS5 sales end up, well, how steep of a drop-off they do go, and then to see where they potentially will be when Grand Theft Auto 6 launches. And I know it's like early to talk about, but I'm very curious where the entire install base will land for PlayStation 5 by the time PS6 does come to the scene, because it technically is still behind PS4. It makes a lot of money, more so than PS4 ever did, but it might only nudge just barely into the 100 millions or maybe like the 110 million ballpark if the price increase and GTA 6 can't really offset each other to the degree where the console is able to see an install base increase beyond PS4. Moving on to some third-party news stories, it's been very well documented this past week that for Hollow Knight Silksong, which is launching very soon, September 4th, that game is so big, it's like the indie games meteor similar to GTA 6, and that where it's launching, everyone else is getting out of the way. Other smaller indie games. So we saw Baby Steps was pushed back to September 23rd. Demon School is pushed back to late November. Eterna Lucis is delayed to 2026. Clover Pit got pushed back by 3 weeks. Feyland is postponed indefinitely, and Stomp and the Sword of Miracles demo is pushed, and that was alongside the Kickstarter being pushed as well, I'm pretty sure. So it's fascinating to see Silksong finally get this release date confirmation, and it literally is a sort of, I don't want to say mini because that, like, I think devalues the importance of it, but in a way it's a mini parallel to GTA 6, and that a lot of these smaller games want to move out of the way from Silksong because they, well, especially with indies needing as much exposure as they do need, like, okay, Silksong, have your fun, launch finally, do what you got to do, and we will try and get our exposure when that cools down just a little bit. Now, I would be remiss to not mention Lumines Arise has a demo right now available on the PlayStation Store. It's actually only available until September 3rd, so download that and try it out if you have not just yet. I will always advocate for Lumines, so whether you've played it before or this is your first one, the demo is out there right now. You can play 3 skins, and there's also some multiplayer that you can experience as well, but the demo is up there before, it'll be taken down September 3rd, and the release date for the game is set for November 11th, so it is coming out not too far away, and pre-orders are live right now, which I should also mention, the Digital Deluxe Edition will have a special Lumi. That's the little character that sits on the portion of the screen. They've always had like a little icon for the Luminous games as you're playing, but one extra character in there is Astrobot, which is really cool to see as well. The demo was fantastic. I loved it. I wanted to play in PSVR 2, but VR support is not available for the demo just yet, but I think that is going to be the way to experience this game. If you are going to try it, I would just say make sure you're wearing headphones. Half the experience with Luminous is getting lost in the entrancing music. Now, one thing we were not able to discuss from last week was Metal Gear Solid Delta because the review embargo lifted as LTPS went live, so now we have all that information available to us. The reviews are looking very good. The game's at like an 85, I think, on Metacritic across 70 plus different reviews. But unfortunately, the problem here is that while it is a faithful remake of MGS3, there are some performance problems on PlayStation 5, as cataloged by Digital Foundry in their video. So base PS5 struggles with performance mode to hit 60 FPS, going as low as 30 to 40 FPS with a dynamic resolution between 720 and 1080. And PS5 Pro is even worse because they're doing that thing where there's no settings. It's a single Pro mode that combines performance and quality enhancements, so the dynamic res is slightly higher to 56p to 1152p, and PSSR is used to resolve a 4K image, but the frame rate in some scenes is worse than the base console, and there's examples of shimmering going on like we saw in other PSSR examples. So your Silent Hill 2 or Jedi Survivor, it seems like they are using probably an older version of PSSR. As we know, there are some refinements and versions, and we never know what version of PSSR a studio is using, and we know 2026 is going to have a big update to PSSR, which mind you, the Pro version is using like improved global illumination and shadow quality, but it's one of those things where the lack of agency to the player is resulting in a worse experience because it's improving the image quality and using some enhancements, but it's all baking it into one mode. So with no option to use the base performance mode and have the Pro push the frame rate to 60, ideally you'd think that's probably what would happen, but it's impossible to know. You're just stuck with what is conceivably a worse version on the Pro console. And that is a problem that Sony still is allowing to happen because they can offer best practices for their studios, but they still allow the studios to do anything, basically. There's no set rule as far as how many modes they can or cannot offer. There just has to be, broad improvements to speak of, and on paper it sounds like it, but then you see technically it's not, right? And that's the issue. So between PSSR, there needs to be some cleanup going on there. and offering more modes, which I sincerely hope Konami will do. They did acknowledge the issues, or rather some issues, not the PS5 performance issues. So a patch is coming, but we don't know if it's actually going to address the problems that we discussed right here. But it is a shame to see such a high-profile release not only perform in a rough state, but actually be worse for the low-volume Pro console. Moving on to a story that I did not see coming at all, but Atari now owns the rights to several IP from Ubisoft, older IP that they've acquired in some kind of agreement, because this was confirmed via a press release from Business Wire, where Atari now owns the publishing rights to Child of Eden, Cold Fear, Grow Home, Grow Up, and I Am Alive. And Atari does plan to bring all of these games back to new platforms and renewed publishing frameworks. So these games are, well, it's an interesting ragtag bunch of games, and I had a little bit of whiplash reading this because I am working on a video right now on I Am Alive. So if you remember PSR, the PlayStation Retrospective series, it's not gone. They take a while to edit, and they're hard to justify when the last two ones did pretty bad, but I still want to try and do more of that series. One of them is on I Am Alive. That was a downloadable only title on PSN, Xbox Live. A very quirky game with the post-apocalyptic approach of resources and management and combat encounters. It's a very weird game, and I'm doing a PSR video on that right now, so that is cool. But that means that game's actually going to be re-released, which I thought was never going to happen. Cold Fear is also crazy because that's, like, I think the big news here. Cold Fear is a really interesting survival horror game from the PS2 days where you're, like, on a boat, and it looks... The way it's presented, it's a vibe. It's also got a unique mechanic with, like, grabbing on to, like, the boat as it's, like, rocking back and forth. It's just, that is also a crazy thing that I thought we'd never see that game come back. Maybe it would be like a PS Plus Premium Classic or something that would be restored, but it sounds like it might get a native port. And also a lot of love for Child of Eden and Grow Home, Grow Up. It's a ragtag bunch of IP that Atari fully intends on bringing back, so... That's cool. I mean, I will always advocate for older IP being restored, and my God, we are having a bit of a renaissance in a way where, whether it's through premium, Nintendo Switch Online, I mean, there's just a lot of this stuff is being brought back, and I am here for it. Now that is a very good segue to our next news story, which is publisher Acclaim, which some of you might remember from the 90s and early 2000s. They were shut down in 2004, 5, something like that. They filed bankruptcy, and only recently it was confirmed that Acclaim was coming back. Well, now we know what they're going to do, or at least they're going to hold a live stream to show off their first reveal, their new game announcement. So that's going to be September 10th at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. And Acclaim does do a lot of older arcade games. In theory, it sounds like, based on the teaser, that's what they're going to continue to do. And again, I will advocate for this all day, every day. Acclaim is very nostalgic to me. And it's a game it's a publisher rather, where I can pull off a number of games from my library, and Acclaim is on that label. They did a lot of stuff back in the day, and it's cool to see them come back in this modern era. Moving on to the wild success of Clair Obscur Expedition 33, where we are finding out that game is going to be more than just a singular entry. It will be a franchise. So recently, speaking with Mr. Matty Plays over on their channel, the creative director at Sandfall Interactive did say that Clair Obscur is the franchise name, so Expedition 33 is the first story in the series, and they definitely went out of their way to say that this is not the end of the franchise, which I think is nice to hear in the here and now. But given how well the game has done and the massive following it does have, it would be in Sandfall's best interest to probably do more Clair Obscur, and so that is good to see. For me, I have not started my playthrough of Expedition 33 just yet. I do have my copy, and I am just trying to find time in between DS2, my very slow platinum run for Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, upcoming Ghost of Yotei, and then, like, oh my God, like Pokemon Legends ZA is coming out, the new Katamari game's coming out, and then Luminous Arise is coming out. I don't know how I'm going to play any of these things before the year does close out, but in between all of that stuff, I want to squeeze in Expedition 33, so I will do that fairly soon, because I know I'm going to probably fall in love with the game like many others, but it is still encouraging to know that it will not be the only game in the franchise. Moving on, we finally have an update for Judas, Ken Levine's game from their new studio, Ghost Story Games, over on the PlayStation blog. We actually do have a small little developer log from Ken Levine where they want to say immediately that's what they want to do more of, is that even if they don't have a big flashy trailer, they want to try and communicate with the community more and talk about the game, how it's doing. And so they did say they've completed a very big playtest of the game where people got to experience the sort of Nemesis-inspired system built into the game where there's relationships that develop over time with the three main characters, and based on your actions in the game, you know, one of the characters can either lean more towards you in a friendly manner or they can turn into a villain. It's like the villainy system is what they're calling it, so they wanted to spend some time talking about that on the PlayStation blog. And it is cool to hear more about the game. We do know from that recent report from Jason Schreier that the game has been going through some very rocky, turbulent, development history, development hell, as we like to call it, right? So, and Ken Levine has been, at times a very problematic game director, changing things left and right and not really settling on certain gameplay themes and mechanics, and can be a pain to work for. It's all been well documented from former staff, but hopefully they do end up shipping something, because I am still a big fan of BioShock. I know a lot of people are, and I think there is a lot of upside to finally seeing Ken Levine ship a game again, and it's a single-player first-person shooter with, very much the sort of same BioShock vibe and aesthetic, and so it'll be interesting to see if they can sort of recapture the BioShock magic, which, we've seen in some cases that wasn't always the case for, like, a Glenn Schofield with Dead Space going into Callisto Protocol as an example. Sometimes there are mistakes and hiccups with, getting a new studio off the ground and a new IP, and so I'm definitely a little nervous, but still cautiously optimistic to see how Judas does end up being. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. You can follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was going over my PSP and PS Vita collection, my physical games collection, and also the total value. So now we've done PS2, 3, 4, 5, PSP Vita. I only have PS1 left, so I have actually almost spent 8-something hours talking about individually every game in my game collection, at least for PlayStation. Haven't done anything non-PlayStation, which I do have a number of games for, but if you're interested in seeing that at some point, I suppose we could do that eventually, but that was the Tuesday upload. And then coming up, we do have a Click R3 this week. We will be live streaming again, probably on either Wednesday or Thursday night, Eastern. It's usually a little later, so like 9:30 p.m. around there. But you can follow me or John on X, or we'll let you know, or if you subscribe to the Spawncast Network channel, but we'll be doing that. And that is pretty much it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.